bodies surface with faces intact. Lake Michigan's cold water preserves victims so well that some resurface months later, looking exactly as they did when they disappeared. Tonight we explore why indigenous tribes warned against this lake for centuries, where the deadliest currents hide, why ships and planes vanish without a trace, and the disturbing truth about what the lake does to everything it takes. Ancient warnings, long before modern drownings, before Coast Guard statistics, before warning signs appeared on beaches, the indigenous peoples who lived along Lake Michigan's shores knew the water was dangerous. The Potawatomi, the Ojibwe, the Menominee, all the tribes who called this region home for thousands of years, they had names for the lake that reflected respect and caution. They marked certain beaches as forbidden. They told stories about the water spirits who pulled people down. They taught their children which areas to avoid, which days were safe for fishing, which weather signs meant death. European settlers dismissed these warnings as superstition. They saw a large lake, nothing more. They had crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Surely this inland water posed no serious threat. They were wrong. Within years of significant settlement beginning in the 1800s, the drownings started, and they never stopped. The indigenous warnings were not mythology. They were accumulated knowledge, centuries of observation compressed into cultural memory. These tribes understood that Lake Michigan behaved differently than rivers or smaller lakes. They recognized patterns that modern science would not explain for another 100 years. One of the most dangerous aspects they identified was the sudden storm. Lake Michigan generates its own weather systems. The lake is large enough, 307 miles long and 118 miles at its widest point, that it creates microclimates. Warm air over the water meets cold air from the land, or vice versa. Temperature differentials cause rapid atmospheric changes. A perfectly calm day can transform into a deadly storm in 15 minutes. Indigenous fishermen learned to read subtle signs, a certain quality to the light, the behavior of birds, the feel of the wind shifting. These observations kept them alive. But settlers, unfamiliar with the lake's moods, ventured out on days that looked safe and never returned. The tribes also understood the cold. Lake Michigan is fed by snowmelt and underground springs. Even in midsummer, water temperatures in many areas never exceed 70 degrees. Near the surface it might feel pleasant, but deeper water stays brutally cold year-round. The indigenous peoples knew that falling into this water, especially in spring or fall, meant you had minutes before your body shut down. They told stories about people who swam strongly, who were young and healthy, who simply stopped moving after a few minutes in the water. Their muscles quit working. Their breathing became labored. They slipped beneath the surface. This was not weakness or poor swimming ability. This was cold water doing what cold water does, pulling heat from the body faster than it can be generated, causing hypothermia that kills in stages, first taking your strength, then your coordination, then your consciousness, then your life. Modern science now confirms what the tribes knew. Water conducts heat away from the body 25 times faster than air. When that water is 50 or 60 degrees, hypothermia begins within minutes. Even strong swimmers become weak and disoriented. The lake does not care about your swimming ability. It only cares about temperature differential and time. Another phenomenon the indigenous peoples recognized was the Seiche. They did not have a scientific name for it, but they knew the water level could suddenly change. They knew that beaches could flood without warning, that harbors could drain and refill. They understood the lake breathed, moving massive amounts of water back and forth. A seiche occurs when wind or atmospheric pressure pushes water to one end of the lake. Then, when the force stops, the water rebounds, oscillating back and forth like water sloshing in a bathtub. Except this bathtub is 300 miles long and the water weighs trillions of tons. These oscillations can raise or lower water levels by 10 feet or more in a matter of minutes. Someone standing on a pier or fishing from rocks can suddenly find themselves waist-deep in water. The lake reaches up and pulls them in. Or a beach that seemed safe is suddenly exposed, and people walk out onto wet sand, not realizing the water will return. When the Seiche rebounds, the water comes back fast, faster than people can run, sweeping them away. The tribes taught their children to never turn their back on the lake, to always be aware of the water's movement, to respect that it could change without warning. This knowledge saved lives for generations, but as native populations were displaced and their warnings dismissed as primitive superstition, the death toll began to climb. Today, drownings in Lake Michigan average between 40 and 60 per year. That is just drownings, not counting boating accidents or other water-related deaths. Over a decade, that is 500 people. Over a century, 5,000. Since systematic record-keeping began, the number is in the tens of thousands. And these are only the reported deaths, only the cases where a body was recovered or witnesses confirmed someone went into the water. The Indigenous warnings were right. Lake Michigan is dangerous, not because of monsters or spirits, but because of physics, because of weather patterns, because of cold water and hidden currents, and the sheer size of a body of water is so large it behaves like an ocean but sits in the middle of a continent where people treat it like a swimming pool. Structural kill zones. The most dangerous places on Lake Michigan are not the open water. They are the places humans built to make the lake safer. Piers, breakwalls, harbor entrances, lighthouse foundations. These structures were designed to protect boats and create safe harbors, but they also create the deadliest currents on the lake, invisible kill zones where even strong swimmers are pulled under in seconds. Walk along any Lake Michigan beach town and you will see piers extending into the water. These are iconic structures, often with lighthouses at the end, popular spots for fishing and sightseeing. On a sunny summer day, they are crowded with families, children running along the concrete, people taking photographs of the water. They look safe. They are not. When waves hit a pier, water flows around and underneath the structure. This creates circular currents and undertows that form instantly and without visible warning. Someone standing at the end of a pier, or worse, in the water next to a pier, can be pulled under the platform. Once underneath, the current pins them against the concrete and steel pilings. They cannot surface. They cannot swim free. The waves keep pushing them deeper under the structure, holding them there until they drown. Every year, multiple people die this way. The scenarios are almost identical. Someone is walking on the pier or fishing from it. A large wave comes, bigger than the ones before it. It washes over the pier, sweeping the person into the water. Witnesses see them surface, see them try to swim back. Then they disappear under the pier and never come back up. Rescue attempts are difficult. The same currents that trap the victim make it dangerous for rescuers to approach. By the time boats arrive, the victim has usually been underwater for several minutes, pinned in place by thousands of pounds of moving water. Recovery of the body often has to wait until the waves calm, sometimes hours or days later. The Coast Guard has placed warning signs on most piers. Never go on the pier during high waves. Never swim near pier structures. But people ignore these warnings. They underestimate the power of the water. They think they can outswim a current. They think they are being careful. Then the wave comes and it is too late. Breakwalls are even more dangerous. These are large barriers built offshore, usually made of stacked concrete blocks or large rocks, designed to create calm water behind them for harbors and marinas. But the gaps between blocks and the channels where water flows through create concentrated currents that accelerate to incredible speeds. Water has to go somewhere. When waves push it against a breakwall, it finds the gaps and rushes through. Someone swimming in the calm water behind the breakwall might not realize they are drifting toward one of these gaps. Then the current grabs them. They are pulled through the opening, accelerating as the flow concentrates, pushed out into open water on the other side where waves crash directly. These currents can reach speeds of 8 to 10 miles per hour. Olympic swimmers at their peak can manage 5 miles per hour for short bursts. An average person can swim perhaps 2 miles per hour. The physics are simple. No one can swim against these currents. Once caught, you go where the water takes you. Lighthouse foundations create a different type of danger. The concrete bases that support these structures extend deep underwater. Water flowing around them creates circular currents, almost like whirlpools that trap swimmers in a loop. You swim as hard as you can, but you simply circle the foundation, unable to escape the pattern, burning energy until exhaustion takes over. Experienced divers know about these circular currents. They teach students to swim perpendicular to the current, not against it, to break out of the circle. But recreational swimmers do not know this. They panic, they swim directly against the flow, they tire quickly, and they drown. Harbor entrances combine all these dangers. Water flows in and out with waves and seiches. Breakwalls concentrate the flow. Pier structures create additional turbulence. The result is a complex system of currents, many pulling in different directions, some rotating, some flowing straight out to deep water. These areas are labeled on charts as dangerous for small boats. They should be labeled as fatal for swimmers. Yet people swim in these areas constantly. They see calm water inside the harbor and assume it is safe. They do not understand that what looks like a gentle flow is actually a powerful current that will drag them out into the lake. Once past the harbor entrance, the current releases them into open water, often far from shore, exhausted from fighting the flow, with no energy left to swim back. The catch basin effect is perhaps the most insidious danger because it happens in areas that look completely safe. Shallow water, gentle waves, families playing nearby. But the bottom topography, the shape of the lake bed, creates a basin where water collects and then flows out through a narrow channel. Someone standing in waist-deep water suddenly feels the sand disappear beneath their feet. They have stepped into the channel. The current grabs them and pulls them toward deeper water. This happens so fast that people on shore often do not realize someone is in trouble until they are already 50 feet offshore. The victim might not even have time to call for help. One moment standing, the next moment pulled off balance, tumbling in the current, unable to get footing, being dragged away from the beach. The most disturbing aspect of these structural kill zones is that they claim victims at the same locations year after year. Certain piers have multiple deaths attributed to them. Specific harbor entrances are known locally as dangerous, yet no permanent closures happen. The beaches and piers remain open because the danger is invisible. On a calm day, these areas look no different than any other stretch of water. Lifeguards know where the danger spots are. Local residents know. Coast Guard personnel know. They can point to specific locations and tell you how many people have died there. But tourists do not know. Visitors from inland areas who have never seen a body of water this large do not know. They make assumptions based on what they can see. The water looks calm, people are swimming nearby, it must be safe. Then they wade in, or they fish from the pier, or they let their children play in the water near the breakwall, and the lake takes them, quickly, quietly, without drama or warning, just gone. The Lake Michigan Triangle. In the northern section of Lake Michigan, roughly between Ludington, Michigan, Manitowoc, Wisconsin, and Benton Harbor, Michigan, lies an area where ships, planes, and people have vanished without explanation. No wreckage, no bodies, no distress signals, just absence. Researchers and locals call it the Lake Michigan Triangle. The comparison to the Bermuda Triangle is intentional. Like its oceanic counterpart, this area has a concentration of disappearances that defy easy explanation. Skeptics dismiss it as coincidence, as statistical clustering that means nothing. But the people who have studied the cases, who have reviewed the records, who have compared what happened here to other areas of the lake, they know something is different about this region. The most famous disappearance is Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 2501. On June 23, 1950, the DC-4 aircraft was flying from New York to Minneapolis with 58 people aboard. The flight path took it over Lake Michigan. Weather was poor that night, thunderstorms, low visibility. At 11:13 p.m., the pilot requested permission to descend to a lower altitude. Permission was granted. That was the last communication. The plane never arrived in Minneapolis. When it was reported overdue, a massive search began. Coast Guard vessels, private boats, aircraft all scoured the area where the plane should have been. They found nothing for several days. Then debris began washing ashore near South Haven, Michigan. Small pieces of the aircraft, seat cushions, personal belongings, but no bodies, no large sections of wreckage, no answers about what happened. The official investigation concluded the plane likely encountered severe weather and broke apart in flight. But this explanation does not account for several strange facts. The pilot did not report any emergency. He was experienced, calm in his final transmission. The weather, while poor, was not unprecedented. Planes flew through worse conditions regularly. More disturbing is what was not found. A DC-4 is a large aircraft. Even if it broke apart, there should have been substantial wreckage. The lake is only 900 feet deep in that area, well within the capabilities of salvage equipment available even in 1950. Multiple searches were conducted. Nothing was ever found. 58 people in a large aircraft simply vanished. Some researchers suggest the plane might have strayed off course, that it actually crashed much farther north where the lake is deeper. But radar tracking and radio triangulation from the final transmission place it exactly where the search is focused. The plane should have been there. It was not. In 1891, the schooner Thomas Hume left Chicago bound for Muskegon, Michigan, loaded with lumber. She sailed into the same general area where Flight 2501 would vanish 59 years later. The Hume never arrived at Muskegon. No distress signal was sent. No wreckage was found. 7 crew members disappeared. The weather at the time was fair. Other ships sailing the same route reported no difficulties. The Hume was a sound vessel, recently inspected, well-maintained. She simply sailed into the triangle and ceased to exist. Multiple searches found nothing. No debris washed ashore, no bodies recovered. In the years since, despite improved underwater detection technology, despite hundreds of shipwrecks being located and documented in Lake Michigan, the Hume has never been found. Somewhere in that triangle of water, a 100-foot schooner and 7 men rest on the lake bottom, unseen, unmarked. The Rosabelle was a fishing tug operating out of Grand Haven, Michigan. On April the 21st, 1921, she left port with a crew of 11 men. The weather was calm, visibility good. The Rosabelle was heading to established fishing grounds in the Triangle area. She never returned. Days later, the Coast Guard found her. The vessel was drifting, sails still set, fishing lines in the water, gear stowed properly. In the cabin, a meal was laid out on the table, half-eaten. Coffee cups sat beside plates. The crew's personal belongings were untouched. But there was no crew. All 11 men were gone. No blood, no signs of struggle, no indication that anything violent had occurred. The boat was intact, functioning properly. It was as if the crew had simply vanished mid-meal, mid-task, leaving everything exactly as it was. Investigation found no explanation. Theories ranged from carbon monoxide poisoning that caused hallucinations and made the crew jump overboard to a rogue wave that swept everyone off deck simultaneously. But neither theory explains why the boat showed no damage, why gear was properly stowed, why a meal was set out and partially consumed. The 11 men of the Rosabelle were never found. No bodies washed ashore. No remains were ever recovered. They simply ceased to exist, leaving behind a ghost ship that answered no questions. The Triangle has claimed dozens of other vessels. Some explanations seem reasonable: storms, equipment failure, human error, but a significant number have the same characteristics: no distress call, no wreckage, complete disappearance. Ships that should have left at least some trace, should have given their crews time to send a mayday, that should be findable on the lake bottom, they are just gone. This pattern of silence is what makes the Triangle disturbing. In most maritime disasters, even sudden ones, there is evidence. A distress call, debris, bodies, something that tells the story of what happened. But in the Triangle, multiple cases have none of this. No final communication, no trace, just absence. Modern technology has not solved the mystery. Sonar mapping of the lake bottom continues. Shipwreck hunters search for famous missing vessels. Occasionally they find wrecks that were previously unknown, but the most famous disappearances, Flight 2501, the Thomas Hume, others remain undiscovered. Some researchers suggest underwater currents in the triangle might be unusual, that wrecks could be covered by sediment more quickly than in other areas. Others point to magnetic anomalies that might interfere with navigation equipment. Geological surveys have found areas where the lake bottom drops off steeply, creating deep trenches where wrecks might settle and be difficult to detect. But these explanations do not account for everything. They do not explain why there are no distress calls. They do not explain ghost ships found with crews missing. They do not explain how large objects, ships, and aircraft can vanish so completely that decades of searching finds nothing. The most likely explanation is a combination of factors: unpredictable weather, strong currents, deep water, rapid sinking. But even accepting all of these factors, the concentration of complete disappearances in this specific area remains statistically unusual. Something about the triangle makes vanishing easier, makes rescue harder, makes evidence disappear. Sailors who work the lake regularly report that the triangle area feels different. The water behaves differently. Waves come from unexpected directions. Equipment malfunctions more frequently. Weather changes faster. These are subjective observations, difficult to quantify, but consistent across multiple accounts. Whether the Lake Michigan Triangle is truly anomalous or simply a product of selective attention and pattern seeking, the fact remains that many people have entered that area and never come out. Their families never got closure. Their stories were never completed. They became statistics, names on lists of missing persons, questions without answers. The missing every summer, people disappear from Lake Michigan beaches. Not all of them. Most swimmers return safely, dry off, go home. But a percentage, small but consistent, wade into the water and are never seen again. No body is recovered. No witnesses see what happened. They simply vanish. In July 2019, a teenage boy was swimming with friends at a beach in Muskegon, Michigan. Witnesses say he was playing in waist-deep water, laughing, talking to friends just a few feet away. Someone looked away for a moment, looked back, and he was gone. No splash, no cry for help, just absent. His friends immediately raised the alarm. Lifeguards and then Coast Guard began searching within minutes. The water was not deep in the area where he vanished. Visibility was reasonable, but they found nothing. Not that day, not in the weeks of searching that followed. His body was never recovered. The investigation concluded he likely drowned and the body was carried by currents to deep water. But that does not explain how he disappeared instantly in shallow water with friends nearby. It does not explain why the immediate search found nothing. It does not explain where he went. This is not an isolated case. Multiple people every year vanish this way. They are swimming or wading or playing in the water. People are nearby, sometimes within touching distance, then they are gone. The water closes over them and they do not resurface. Some bodies are eventually recovered, but not where they entered the water. A swimmer disappears from a Chicago beach and their body turns up 2 weeks later near Milwaukee, 60 miles away. A person goes missing from South Haven and is found near Grand Haven, 30 miles north. The distances make no sense. Bodies do not drift that far that fast. Currents do not move in straight lines for dozens of miles. Lake Michigan has complex underwater currents: cold water on the bottom, warmer water on the surface, wind-driven surface currents, thermal stratification that creates layers moving in different directions. A body that sinks can be caught in currents that are completely different from what is happening on the surface. The lake also has what divers call thermoclines, sharp temperature boundaries between layers of water. These can create zones where a body becomes neutrally buoyant, neither floating nor sinking, drifting along at a specific depth. Depending on how this layer flows, a body could travel significant distances underwater before eventually surfacing miles from where it entered. But this does not explain the initial disappearance. How does someone vanish in waist-deep water with people nearby? Some theories suggest sudden drop-offs, that the lake bottom can fall away unexpectedly, turning shallow water into deep water in a single step. Someone walks along and suddenly there is no bottom. They go under, panic, inhale water, and sink before they can recover. Other explanations focus on waves. Lake Michigan can generate surprisingly large waves even on days that seem calm. An unexpected wave hits someone from behind, knocks them down, disorients them. By the time they surface, the current has moved them. They are no longer in waist-deep water. They are in deep water, tired from the initial struggle, unable to swim back to where people can help them. Temperature shock is another factor. The surface water might be warm, 70 degrees, comfortable for swimming, but deeper water just a few feet down might be 50 degrees. Someone steps into a cold pocket and their body reacts involuntarily. Muscles cramp. Breathing becomes difficult. They cannot swim effectively and they go under. All of these explanations are possible. All have been documented. But they do not fully account for the pattern of sudden disappearances in shallow water with witnesses nearby. Something about the lake allows people to vanish in ways that seem impossible, in conditions that seem safe. The families of the missing are left with terrible uncertainty. Their loved one is somewhere in the lake. The body has not been recovered, might never be recovered. There is no funeral, no closure, just absence and the knowledge that the lake took their family member and is not giving them back. Search operations after a disappearance are intense but brief. Coast Guard helicopters scan the water. Boats search in grid patterns. Divers check the immediate area. But after a few days, if nothing is found, the search is scaled back and then suspended. The lake is too large. The number of places a body could be is too vast. Resources are limited. Eventually, the searching stops and families are left to hope the lake might someday return their loved one. Sometimes it does. Months later, miles away, a body surfaces. Decomposition has been slowed by cold water, but identification is still possible through dental records or DNA. The family at least gets confirmation, gets remains to bury, but more often the lake keeps them. They become part of the long list of missing persons, open cases that will never be solved, people who entered the water and did not come back. The most disturbing aspect is how routine this has become. Drownings in Lake Michigan are so common that they barely make the news unless the circumstances are unusual. A person goes missing, the search happens, the family grieves, and then it is forgotten. The lake moves on. Summer continues. People keep swimming. And occasionally the lake takes another. Ghost ships. On a calm morning in October 1955, the fishing tug Wanderer was found drifting off Grand Haven, Michigan. The Coast Guard received a report of an unmanned vessel and dispatched a patrol boat to investigate. When they boarded the Wanderer, they found a scene frozen in time. The engine was running. The fishing nets were deployed. In the cabin, breakfast dishes sat on the table, food still on the plates. A pot of coffee sat on the stove, still warm. The captain's log was open to that morning's entry, notes about weather and planned fishing locations written in neat handwriting. Everything was normal except for one detail. The crew was gone. 3 men had been aboard the Wanderer when she left port that morning. All 3 were experienced fishermen. All 3 knew the lake intimately, but they were nowhere on the vessel. No signs of struggle, no blood, no damage to the boat. They had simply vanished, leaving their ship running, their work in progress, their breakfast uneaten. Investigation found no explanation. The life raft was still secured. Life jackets were hanging in their usual places. Nothing was missing from the cabin. The weather had been calm. Radio communication showed no distress calls. The boat's equipment was functioning normally. The official report suggested the crew might have fallen overboard while working the nets, that a rope had snagged, or equipment had malfunctioned. But this does not explain how all 3 men could fall overboard simultaneously without any of them activating emergency equipment or sending a mayday. It does not explain why the boat continued on course with the engine running, as if someone was still at the helm. The 3 fishermen were never found. No bodies washed ashore. No remains were recovered. They simply ceased to exist, leaving behind a ghost ship that offered no answers. The Wanderer is not unique. Lake Michigan has a long history of vessels found adrift or anchored with no crew aboard. Some cases have plausible explanations. Others, like the Wanderer, remain mysteries. In 1876, the schooner Dreadnought was discovered drifting near Racine, Wisconsin. She was under sail, moving normally, cargo secured in the hold, but the crew of 6 was missing. Lifeboats were still attached. Personal belongings remained in the crew quarters. The ship showed no damage. The men had disappeared. In 1932, a fishing boat was found anchored near Pentwater, Michigan. The anchor was properly set. The boat was tied securely, but the 2-man crew was gone. Their fishing gear was laid out as if they had been preparing to fish. Their lunch was in the cabin. They had vanished between arriving at their fishing spot and beginning their work. Ghost ships create profound unease because they represent interrupted normalcy. These are not dramatic disasters. There is no fire, no collision, no storm damage. Everything looks fine except the people are gone. It is as if they were plucked from the vessel, removed cleanly, leaving everything else untouched. Theories about these disappearances often focus on carbon monoxide poisoning. Boat engines and heaters can produce the gas. If it accumulates in the cabin, it causes confusion and hallucinations. Victims might jump overboard thinking they are somewhere else, doing something else. By the time they hit the cold water and realize their mistake, it is too late. But this does not explain cases where multiple crew members vanished from different parts of the ship. Carbon monoxide affects everyone in an enclosed space. It does not cause people on deck to jump overboard, and it does not explain ghost ships found with engines off, where carbon monoxide poisoning was impossible. Another theory suggests rogue waves. Lake Michigan can generate individual waves significantly larger than the surrounding waves. A rogue wave could wash everyone off deck simultaneously, leaving the boat intact but crewless. However, this should leave signs. Disturbed equipment, items washed out of position, damage to railings or deck structures. Ghost ships typically show none of this. The most unsettling explanation is the simplest. Something about Lake Michigan allows people to disappear completely without leaving evidence. Whether through unusual currents that quickly carry bodies to deep water, through underwater topography that creates hidden dangers, or through conditions we do not yet understand, the lake can take people in ways that leave no trace. Ghost ships continue to appear. Modern vessels with GPS and radio communication vanish just as thoroughly as 19th century sailing ships. In 2006, a fishing boat was found drifting near Sheboygan, Wisconsin. The engine was running, the radio was on. The GPS showed the boat had been circling for hours, but the crew of 2 had vanished. No distress call was sent. No emergency beacon was activated. The men simply disappeared from their boat while it continued to operate normally. When the Coast Guard located and boarded the vessel, they found a scene identical to historical ghost ships. Work in progress, no signs of trouble, just absence. The families of missing crew members face the same terrible uncertainty as families of missing swimmers. Their loved ones are somewhere, alive or dead, but there is no body, no proof, no closure. The investigation concludes with words like presumed drowned and lost at sea, but these are guesses. No one knows what actually happened. The ghost ships themselves often continue in service. After investigation and legal proceedings, they are sold or returned to owners. They are repainted, renamed, given new crews. The memory of the missing is erased. The boat that was once a crime scene or a mystery becomes just another fishing vessel or pleasure craft on the lake. But people who know the history refuse to work on these boats. Sailors are superstitious. A ship that has lost its crew is marked, cursed, dangerous. Even if the official explanation is accident or equipment failure, even if there is no evidence of anything supernatural, the boats are avoided. Some eventually sink or are scrapped. Others sail for years with new owners who do not know or do not care about what happened. Haunted lighthouses. The Seiches Point. Lighthouse stands on Michigan's Upper Peninsula, overlooking Lake Michigan. Built in 1895, it warned ships away from dangerous shoals and rocks. The lighthouse served for decades, staffed by keepers who lived in isolation, responsible for maintaining the light that saved lives. One of those keepers was Captain Joseph Willie Townsend, who died at the lighthouse in 1910. According to official records, Townsend died of natural causes, though some accounts suggest he succumbed to influenza while locked in the lighthouse during a storm. His body remained in the building for several days before the weather allowed transport to the mainland for burial. Since then, the lighthouse has been known as one of the most haunted locations on the Great Lakes. Multiple Coast Guard personnel who staffed the lighthouse in later years reported strange occurrences: footsteps in empty rooms, doors opening and closing by themselves, the smell of cigar smoke in areas where no one was present, tools moved from where they were left. These reports were consistent across different keepers, different time periods, all describing similar phenomena. After the lighthouse was automated and then converted to a museum, staff and visitors continued to report experiences: figures seen in windows of the keeper's quarters, the sound of someone walking up the spiral staircase to the light tower when the building was empty, objects in the museum rearranged overnight, cold spots in specific locations even in summer heat. Skeptics note that old buildings make noises, that wind can cause doors to move, that memories are unreliable and people see what they expect to see, but the reports are remarkably consistent. The footsteps follow the same pattern, walking the rounds a keeper would make checking the building. The cigar smell appears in the same locations. The cold spots do not move. The most unnerving reports come from sensitive individuals who claim to feel a presence in the lighthouse. They describe a man who is confused about why strangers are in his home, who does not understand that he is dead, who continues his routine of maintaining the light and keeping watch over the lake. Some visitors report feeling unwelcome, being watched, followed through rooms by something they cannot see. Seiches Point is not unique. Multiple lighthouses on Lake Michigan have similar reputations. These structures were built on sites where ships had wrecked repeatedly, where sailors had drowned in large numbers. The lighthouses were meant to prevent more deaths, but they also stand as markers over underwater graveyards. White River Light Station in Whitehall, Michigan has reports of a former keeper, Captain William Robinson, who died in the lighthouse in 1819. Staff report his figure seen in windows checking the light, even though it has been automated for decades. Objects move in the keeper's house, return to positions Robinson would have placed them, as if he is still maintaining his station. St. Joseph North Pier lights, which stand at the entrance to St. Joseph Harbor, have a history of keepers dying at their post. Winter storms would trap keepers on the pier for days. Several froze to death before rescue could reach them. Visitors to the pier report cold spots that move, that follow you along the structure, the feeling of someone standing just behind you, the sound of footsteps on metal grating when no one else is present. The old Presque Isle Lighthouse in northern Michigan was the site of a keeper's death during a winter storm. He was attempting to reach the shore for supplies when he was caught by ice and cold. His body was not found until spring. Since then, multiple people have reported seeing a figure walking from the lighthouse toward the shore, following the same path the keeper took on his final journey, then vanishing. Psychological explanations for these experiences focus on suggestion and expectation. People know the history of the lighthouse, know that someone died there, and they experience phenomena that confirms what they expect. Old buildings in isolated locations naturally feel eerie. Wind and settling structures create sounds that can be interpreted as footsteps or voices. But some reports come from people who did not know the history. Visitors who experience something strange report it, and only later learn that what they described matches historical accounts. Children who see figures in windows and describe details about their clothing that match photographs of former keepers. Whether these phenomena are actually the spirits of dead keepers or simply the power of suggestion and environmental factors, the lighthouses remain unsettling places. They stand in isolation, often accessible only by boat or long walks along beaches. They are monuments to maritime safety built on foundations of repeated death. Ships crashed into rocks, sailors drowned in cold water, and lighthouses were constructed over their graves. The keepers who staffed these lights lived in profound isolation. Days or weeks could pass without seeing another person. The routine was monotonous: check the light, maintain the equipment, watch the water, repeat. In winter, ice could cut off access for months. Keepers trapped in the lighthouse with dwindling supplies, surrounded by frozen water, watching storms rage, must have felt they were living at the edge of the world. Some keepers went mad from the isolation. Others died from exposure, from accidents, from illness. Their deaths often went undiscovered for days or weeks until someone was able to reach the lighthouse and found a body. The keeper would be buried on the mainland and a replacement brought in, someone new who would take up the same routine, the same isolation, knowing what had happened to their predecessor. The lighthouse service was dangerous work. The keepers were saving lives, their light warning ships away from destruction. But the cost was measured in years of isolation, in psychological strain, in deaths that came slowly from loneliness or quickly from the lake's fury. Today, most lighthouses are automated. No keepers live in them. They are maintained by Coast Guard personnel who visit periodically or by historical societies that operate them as museums. But the buildings remember, the routines persist, footsteps walk the rounds, lights check the equipment, figures watch the water. Whether these are genuine hauntings or simply the echo of countless hours of repetitive work soaking into the structure, the lighthouses feel occupied even when empty. Visitors who spend the night in lighthouse keepers' quarters, now offered as unique accommodation at some sites, often report disturbed sleep, dreams of drowning, the sensation of water pressing down, voices calling for help. Some wake gasping, feeling they were underwater, fighting to surface. These experiences might be nightmares influenced by location and history, or they might be something else, some residual trauma in the building, some record of suffering that can be felt by those sensitive to it. The lighthouse at Little Sable Point in Michigan has reports of a keeper who drowned trying to rescue shipwreck survivors. His body was pulled from the water and brought to the lighthouse. Now people report seeing wet footprints appearing on the floor, leading from the entrance to the keeper's quarters. The footprints are always wet, even in the middle of summer when everything else is dry. They appear, fade, and reappear, following the same path. Physical evidence for hauntings is always ambiguous. Footprints could be condensation, sounds could be wind or settling structures, cold spots could be drafts, figures in windows could be reflections or tricks of light. But the consistency of reports across time, across different witnesses, across multiple locations, suggests something persistent. Perhaps what lingers in these lighthouses is not the keeper himself, but the weight of the work, the years of vigilance, the fear of failure. A lighthouse keeper's mistake could mean ships crashing and people dying. That responsibility, carried year after year in isolation, might leave an imprint. The building itself might hold the memory of that vigilance, replaying it long after the keeper is gone. The haunted lighthouses of Lake Michigan are popular tourist destinations now. People take ghost tours, spend the night hoping for experiences, tell stories around campfires. The tragedies have become entertainment, but for the keepers who died, for the sailors whose lives they tried to save, these places were deadly serious. The lighthouses marked the boundary between safety and destruction. On one side was harbor, shelter, life. On the other side was rock, cold water, death. The preservation Lake Michigan's water is cold and fresh. These two characteristics combine to create an environment where organic decay proceeds much more slowly than in warmer or saltier water. Bodies and shipwrecks submerged in Lake Michigan can be preserved for decades, sometimes appearing almost unchanged from the moment they sank. This creates a disturbing reality. The lake bottom is littered with wrecks that look like they sank yesterday, even if they have been underwater for a century. Ships sit upright with cargo still in their holds. Dishes remain on tables in crew quarters. Boots stand by bunks as if their owners just stepped out. The cold water has frozen these scenes in time, preserving every detail. Divers who explore these wrecks describe the experience as eerie. Swimming through a ship from the 1800s that still has goods in the cargo hold, that still has the captain's personal effects in the cabin, feels like trespassing in a space that was only recently occupied. The absence of decay creates the impression that the crew might return at any moment. that this is not a historical artifact but a living space temporarily abandoned. The same preservation affects human remains. Bodies in Lake Michigan decompose slowly. The cold water temperatures, often in the 40s even in summer at depth, dramatically slow bacterial activity. Fresh water prevents the bloating and rapid deterioration that occurs in salt water. The result is bodies that can remain largely intact for months. This means victims of drowning who are eventually recovered can sometimes be identified visually. Their faces are recognizable, their clothing is intact. They look like they could have drowned yesterday rather than weeks or months ago. For families, this is both a blessing and a horror. They can identify their loved one, can have a body to bury. But they also see their loved one looking almost alive, preserved in death in a way that seems unnatural. In 2004, a swimmer who drowned off Chicago was recovered 4 months later near Kenosha, Wisconsin. The body had traveled nearly 50 miles underwater. When recovered, the victim was so well preserved that initial reports suggested the drowning had occurred recently. Only investigation revealed the body had been in the water for months, protected from decay by cold temperatures and carried along the lake bottom by currents. Cases like this are not rare. Every year, bodies are recovered from Lake Michigan in states of preservation that seem impossible. The lake acts as a natural refrigerator, maintaining bodies in cold storage, preventing the normal processes of decomposition. This preservation extends to facial features, to expressions. Some victims are recovered with their mouths open as if calling for help. Others have their arms extended, frozen in swimming motions. The cold water preserves them in their last living moment, creating a terrible stillness that captures the instant of death. For forensic investigators, this preservation is valuable. Cause of death can be determined more easily. Evidence is better preserved. But for families, for the general public, for anyone who learns the details, there is something deeply disturbing about bodies that remain unchanged by time. The wrecks themselves tell frozen stories. The Lakeland, a schooner that sank in Lake Michigan in 1897, was found with the crew's clothing still hanging on hooks, dishes still in cupboards, navigation equipment still at the helm. Over a century underwater and the ship looks ready to sail again if only someone would raise her and pump out the water. The Francisco Morazan, a freighter that ran aground in 1960, sits in shallow water off South Manitou Island. Divers can swim through the wreck easily. Inside, cargo remains where it was stored. The engine room still has tools where workers left them. Paperwork in the captain's cabin, though waterlogged, is still legible. The wreck has been underwater for over 60 years, but looks like it sank last season. This preservation creates an underwater museum, a collection of frozen moments that document the lake's history of disaster. But it is a museum without curation, without explanation, where artifacts and remains sit in cold darkness, waiting for divers to discover them. Not all wrecks are accessible. Many lie in deep water, 200 or 300 feet down beyond the range of recreational diving. These wrecks are visited only by technical divers with specialized equipment and training. They return with photographs and videos showing ships that appear almost new despite being lost for generations. The wreck of the Rouse Simmons, the Christmas tree ship that sank in 1912 while carrying a load of Christmas trees to Chicago, was found in 1971. The trees were still in the cargo hold, preserved by cold water, their branches intact. Over 50 years underwater and the cargo looked ready to deliver. These preservation effects create ethical questions. Many wrecks contain human remains. The ships are grave sites, places where people died. But they are also historical artifacts, valuable records of maritime history. Should they be left undisturbed as graves, or should they be explored, documented, photographed to preserve knowledge? Michigan law protects many wrecks, making it illegal to remove artifacts or disturb the sites. But enforcement is difficult. The lake is vast, wrecks are scattered across hundreds of miles, and not all can be monitored. Some have been damaged by trophy hunters removing brass fixtures or other valuable items. Others have been disturbed by divers who do not understand or respect that these are burial sites. The most disturbing aspect of Lake Michigan's preservation is what it says about the nature of the lake. This is not a warm tropical sea where nature quickly reclaims what sinks. This is cold, dark water that holds on to everything. The lake is a vast archive of disaster, preserving ships and bodies and the evidence of human error in perfect detail. Divers describe a particular quality to the light at depth in Lake Michigan. Because the water is relatively clear compared to oceans, and because the lake bottom is often light-colored sand or stone, there is a dim but pervasive illumination even at depth. Wrecks do not sit in total darkness. They exist in a perpetual twilight, visible but remote, preserved but inaccessible. Swimming through this space, seeing ships that are decades or centuries old but look recent, seeing personal effects and cargo and sometimes human remains, creates a profound unease. Time has stopped for these wrecks. They exist in a liminal space, neither fully past nor somehow present, frozen at the moment of their sinking. The sailors who died in these ships remain aboard in some cases. Bodies were not always recovered. Some went down with their vessels and were never retrieved. These remains are still there, sitting in crew quarters, trapped in cargo holds, preserved by the cold water. They are part of the wreck, part of the archaeological record, and part of the ongoing tragedy of Lake Michigan. The patient Lake Michigan is 307 miles long, 118 miles wide, and has a surface area of 22,400 square miles. It contains 1,180 cubic miles of water. The average depth is 279 feet. The maximum depth is 923 feet. These numbers describe a body of water so vast it functions as an inland sea. But size alone does not explain Lake Michigan's danger. The ocean is larger, deeper, more powerful. Yet the ocean is understood as dangerous. People respect it. They approach it with caution. Lake Michigan does not receive that respect. It is surrounded by land, by cities, by vacation towns. It looks safe. It looks manageable. This perception is what kills. The lake does not warn. It does not announce its dangers. It simply waits. When someone makes a mistake, underestimates a current, ignores warning signs, ventures out in weather they should not, the lake responds instantly and permanently. There is no grace period, no second chances. The water is cold, the currents are strong, and mistakes are fatal. Indigenous peoples understood this. Their warnings were not superstition. They were survival knowledge earned over generations. The tribes knew which beaches were dangerous, which weather patterns meant death, which times of year the lake was most lethal. They respected the water and taught their children to fear it appropriately. Modern society has lost that cultural knowledge. Tourists arrive from inland areas having never seen a body of water this large. They treat it like a lake from their hometown, a place where kids swim and boats drift lazily. They do not understand they are standing at the edge of a vast cold system that kills dozens of people every year. The structural kill zones, the hidden currents near piers and breakwalls, these exist because humans tried to make the lake safer but did not fully understand the physics involved. We built structures to protect harbors and accidentally created more dangerous conditions. The lake adapted to what we built, routing its currents through the gaps we left, concentrating its power in ways we did not predict. The Lake Michigan Triangle, if it exists as more than statistical coincidence, demonstrates that there are areas we still do not understand. Places where vessels and people vanish more completely than they should. Whether this is due to underwater topography, unusual currents, magnetic anomalies, or simple bad luck, the effect is the same. People enter and do not return. The missing, those who wade into water and disappear, who are sometimes found months later, miles away, show that Lake Michigan moves things in ways we do not track. Underwater currents we cannot see from the surface, thermal layers that create zones of transport, all working invisibly to carry bodies and debris along paths we cannot predict. Ghost ships found drifting with crews vanished represent the lake's ability to take people without explanation. Whether through carbon monoxide poisoning, rogue waves, panic, or factors we have not identified, The lake can empty a vessel of humans while leaving everything else intact. The boat continues, the people are gone, the water offers no explanation. Haunted lighthouses, if they are genuinely haunted or simply buildings that hold emotional residue, mark the boundary between safety and disaster. These structures were built where the danger was greatest, where sailors had died repeatedly. The keepers who staffed them lived in isolation, watching the lake destroy ships, sometimes able to help, often only able to witness. That trauma, that vigilance, that fear of failure soaked into the buildings. Whether it manifests as footsteps and figures or simply as an oppressive atmosphere, the lighthouses remember. The preservation, the lake's cold water that freezes moments of disaster in perfect detail, turns Lake Michigan into an archive. Wrecks and bodies remain unchanged for decades, creating an underwater museum of tragedy. Every ship on the bottom, every victim preserved in cold darkness, is a record of a mistake, a misjudgment, a moment when the lake was underestimated. All of this combines into a single truth. Lake Michigan is not safe, it is not predictable, it is not forgiving. The water is cold enough to kill in minutes. The currents are strong enough to drown Olympic swimmers. The storms can arise in 15 minutes and generate 20-foot waves. The lake is large enough that rescue can be hours away even from popular beaches, and the lake never forgets. Every person who has drowned, every ship that has sunk, every disaster that has occurred, they remain. Preserved on the lake bottom or lost in deep water, but always there. The lake holds its dead and does not release them willingly. People continue to swim in Lake Michigan, boats continue to sail, the beaches remain popular, life continues. But every summer, the lake takes more. A swimmer here, a boater there. Someone who thought they were safe, who thought they understood the risks, who made one small mistake. The lake does not discriminate. It takes strong swimmers and weak. It takes experienced sailors and novices. It takes those who respect it and those who do not. The water operates by physics, not by fairness. If you are in conditions where hypothermia or drowning can occur, it will occur. Your swimming ability, your intentions, your life story, none of it matters to the water. This is what makes Lake Michigan disturbing. Not that it is malicious, but that it is indifferent. It does not care. It simply exists as a vast system of cold water and moving currents that happens to be lethal to humans. We can study it, map it, predict its behavior to some degree, but we cannot control it or make it safe. The deadly secrets of Lake Michigan are not supernatural. They are not mysterious in the sense of being unknowable. They are simply the reality of a very large, very cold, very powerful body of water that humans persistently underestimate. The Indigenous warnings were right. The sailors who treat the lake with respect and fear are right. Lake Michigan is dangerous. It has always been dangerous. It will always be dangerous. And yet people will continue to swim, to boat, to fish, to live along its shores. Because the lake is also beautiful. The beaches are spectacular. The sunsets are breathtaking. The recreational opportunities are endless. We accept the risk because the reward seems worth it. Most people who enter Lake Michigan return safely. The percentage who die is small, but that percentage is consistent. Year after year, the lake takes its toll. 40 to 60 drownings annually, dozens of boating accidents, multiple disappearances. The numbers add up over time. If you stand on a beach and look out at the water, you are seeing the surface of a vast system that extends hundreds of feet below, that contains currents moving in multiple directions, that can change temperature by 20 degrees between the surface and the depth, that generates its own weather. You are looking at one of the most complex aquatic environments on the planet, and somewhere out there, beneath the waves you can see are hundreds of shipwrecks, thousands of dead. Decades of accumulated tragedy preserved in cold water. The lake remembers them all. Every ship, every sailor, every swimmer who did not make it back. They are still there, resting on the bottom, drifting in deep currents, waiting in the cold. The lake is patient. It does not need to be aggressive. It simply waits for mistakes. And mistakes happen. They always happen. Someone goes out when they should not. Someone ignores warnings, someone underestimates the cold, and the lake takes them. This is the final secret of Lake Michigan. Not that it is actively dangerous, but that it is passively fatal. It does not hunt, it does not chase, it simply exists, cold and powerful and indifferent, and we enter it at our own risk. Most of us will be fine, but some will not return, and the lake will hold them, preserve them, keep them in its cold embrace, adding them to the collection of those who underestimated the water. The lake never forgets, the wrecks remain, the bodies wait in the deep, and every summer the beaches fill with people who believe they will be safe, who trust the calm surface, who do not understand that beneath the beauty lies cold water that does not care if they live or die. Add to conversation